Welcome everyone to the main journey, a way for you to join me through a learning journey through life. My name is Samuel Main, and today we welcome Mark Savant to the show. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, a pleasure to be here, Sam. Excited to get into it, brother.
Yeah, you got a podcast veteran with us today, so I look forward to learning from you and learning about some of the stories. Mark, I'd love to delve straight into your experience with podcasting and ultimately the career that you have built around this form of content. So I know you have a very successful show, the After Hours Entrepreneur, as well as the Markzware podcast production company. But before we delve into some of those details, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your journey actually into podcasting and what that's kind of looked like over the last couple of years.
Oh, man. Way to lay it up, Sam. So my story really started with me staring up at the ceiling on Sunday nights and saying, why does tomorrow need to be Monday? I don't want to go to work. I work in the insurance industry. Not fun. Mondays were the worst. We live for Fridays, right? And, eventually I recognized there's got to be something more. Why sacrifice these great years to doing something that I hated and I felt no passion for and I wasn't getting anything out of? And so I started this journey, Sam, and I started looking at all sorts of different businesses, everything from Amazon FBA to opening up a mattress shop, to opening up my own insurance agency, all sorts of different things. But what I recognized was that I was listening to podcasts all the time in order to learn these skills, in order to vet different markets. I said, why don't I start a podcast? Because I love it. It sounds like fun. I like to be in front of the mic and whatnot. So I started a show. It was called, at the time it was called Act Dad. All right. It's now called the Awesome Dad Show, but that's a whole nother story. But it started out as Act Dad. I did that for about a year and change. And what I recognized, Samuel, is that nobody was paying me to teach them how to be a better father. People were paying me to help them launch their podcasts and grow on social media. And so at that time, I started leaning into it a little bit more. And now, several years in, the business is running. I've got a bunch of clients. I got a bunch of team members, and I'm feeling good about the future.
I like it. Did you have any experience then in actually building a business or even marketing, sales before you started to make this to what it is today?
So the short answer is no. I've always been an employee.
Yeah.
So making that transition from employee to employer is certainly daunting, right? I have a business degree, business management and marketing. I've been in sales jobs before, everything from selling knives to selling stereo equipment, selling insurance. So I understand the way that sales and lead generation work. But where I was really a newbie was in podcasting itself. I don't have a sound engineering degree. So I just spent, thousands of hours in the lab learning and practicing and trying until I eventually recognized that it's probably better just to hire people that live, breathe, eat, and sleep this particular profession. Because there's, when you talk about podcasting and specifically, there's a lot of different things you need to know. You need to know graphic design, you need to know social media marketing, you need to know audio editing and video editing, copywriting, transcriptions, and there's a show notes. There's just a lot to learn. So I think you can attest to this. One of the best things that we can do as business owners, and I learned this pretty quickly is that you want to surround yourself with people that are experts in that field and find ways to develop relationships and synergistic, back scratching, if as it were.
Yeah. It's there's so much to learn. That's been a real steep learning curve for me. I obviously have the understanding from a marketing point of view, the social media management, the sales side, that stuff now just because of business experience is coming into play. But the actual recording and optimizing the setup, the quality is something that I'm developing. It was something that held me up for a long time. And it was the reason I never pressed record. So that was definitely a confronting belief for me, is that I needed to almost forget about all of that and just hit record. And then the rest I could learn. So I'd love to go back to that very first episode for you that you recorded. How did that go? What was that like? Paint that picture for me.
Well, I mean, listen, our first episodes are our worst. I remember when I first started recording, I first started on YouTube, actually. I was kind of documenting the journey. I just recorded right on my phone, and I just used the window lighting. Like I did some of the basic research. And then I upgraded to a $20 lavalier mic, and it sounded so much better. And, then I decided it's time to do the podcast. So I got a slightly better mic, and it just evolves over time. But I think it is important, Sam, and that, anytime you're trying something for the first time, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be great. Michael Jordan didn't just step out on to the basketball court and start draining threes, right? It took years and years and hours of practice. So, I think there needs to be some recognition on our side that it's going to take some work to get good at this. But again, when you hire a coach like yourself, or you hire a podcast agency like I run, we're able to get things moving for you a lot faster. We're able to kind of eliminate a lot of the learning curve, right? One of the things I do with new clients is I give an interview checklist. These are things you want to make sure you check these off before you actually hit record, right? So it's just simple things like that can really make all the difference.
Yeah, love that. So for my audience, it's majority some people in entrepreneurs starting a business. It's also some people follow for the health and fitness aspect too. So why podcasting? Why is that a valuable form for someone who may be starting a business or be looking to push their personal brand? Why is it so powerful?
Right. So it depends. Honestly, it depends on your business, because there's different strategies that you can implement depending on what's working now, what you have planned for the future. Part of the reason that podcasting is so powerful is because it lets you connect with your listeners on a deeper level. It allows people to get to know you on a deeper level. Seeing a 15-second Instagram reel, you're not going to be able to relate anything meaningful that way. Seeing a little picture of you in front of your car or in front of a plane or whatever, like that doesn't actually provide value. So, it doesn't necessarily need to be a podcast. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be like LinkedIn live videos that you do. It could be Clubhouse rooms or Twitter spaces that you hold. But what I think is important is that you have a place where you can have short, quick engagement with your avatar, right? Your optimal client. And that's your Instagram, that's your LinkedIn, that's your TikTok. You want one of those, but you need to have one place where your long form content lives, like the YouTube, the live, the podcast. But one of the reasons I love podcasting is because it lives forever. People still go back and they listen to my episodes that I did years ago. If you're doing a live video, it's harder for that to work. So that's one of the reasons I love podcasting. It's also great for SEO. It's great for your website and improving your rankings there. There's so many benefits, Sam. There's so many benefits. And depending on your business, you might take your show in a different way. But it's really powerful. I'm going to give you actually one more way that people don't really think about, but can be a really good way to leverage a podcast from day one. Because most people, when you think about launching a podcast, you're like, okay, maybe in a couple of years, I'll be able to make a little bit of money from sponsors, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that way. Probably one of the best ways to leverage a podcast is to get on phone calls with your ideal client. Okay. Normally when you're reaching out, and this goes back to the sales talk we're talking about. Normally when I'm reaching out to someone, I've got to email them. I've got to DM them. I'm calling them, cold calling, all that junk, just for them to say, no, I don't want to get on a 30-minute call to learn about your service. But when you flip that and you say, hey, I love what you're doing, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client. I love what you're doing. I'd love to bring you onto my podcast to highlight your skills, right? And then you don't sell them, you just highlight them and show the world how amazing this person is. And then eventually they're going to turn around and say, well, what do you do? Well, it's funny you ask. I just so happen to offer the perfect solution to the problem that you and your company face. So it's a good way of using this tool. Day one is a way to build and develop relationships with your ideal client.
I love that. I love that you mentioned about how podcasts don't go away.
Right.
Is that it's such a powerful platform that these compound. And like you say, the SEO, people can go back and find previous episodes. Something that I've already seen that's been valuable for clients is actually the time that people watch you. They start to learn about you so much because they've actually just consumed so much content from you already. So messaging, you're just going back and forth. You're not truly creating that relationship. When they're listening to a podcast, listen to a video, they're spending hours of their time listening and learning about you. So when they come to then those sales calls or that next stage, they already know a lot about you.
Yes.
Like that's been a really interesting process for me, and then also for one of my clients is leading into this heavily too. Do you have that quite a lot with some of the calls that you have where they're almost like starstruck? Because obviously for you have produced so many podcasts, and like I said, you're a veteran in this world, and there's a lot to learn from my perspective. Have you had that happen before?
It does. It's always cool. I just got back from Podfest the other day, which was awesome. And like the number of people that I didn't know that would come up to me like, wow, Mark, I love your show. I love your email newsletter. I'm like, it just, it lets you know that you're onto something good, it lets you know that you're building something. And I agree, one of the most popular episodes of a podcast is episode number 1.
Yeah.
That's about you. That's about me. Whenever I'm listening to a show for the first time, I go and I listen to that to get a better feel for who this person is. I'm actually and you also, side note for all you veterans out there, if you do or don't know, you can actually re-record and upload new episodes to your episode 1. You cannot do that with any other platform like YouTube. Once it's in there, it is locked in for life. But with a podcast, if let's say a year, 2 years down the road after you've been recording, you can go back to episode 1 and insert the new audio, update the descriptions, update your tags, your metadata, all that can be updated, which as your story grows, your show can grow too. So that's a powerful, quick tip.
It's incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. Yeah, it's already been an interesting journey for me because I started this podcast as a primary way for me to connect with new people and to find a fun way for me again to start creating content, because I love creating, same as you. And that's what this is primarily been about for me. So I'd love to know from your perspective, who's been some of the best guests that you've been connected with, or that you've just been super excited to chat with?
Oh man, there's been so many great guests. I think one of my favorite guests would have to be Pat Flynn. I've watched a lot of his content. He's one of the podcasting OGs.
Nice.
So I've been in, at this point, 3 recording sessions with Pat. And, that was just, like you said, you get kind of starstruck when you hear these people, you're listening to them, you're watching their content. That was super, super cool. I recently had on the show Daryl Eves, who is a big YouTuber. He hosts one of the largest YouTube video conferences in the world. It might be the largest. It's absolutely massive. He co-hosts it with Mr. Beast. And that was a super cool person to talk to as well. One of the cool things that happened is, I run this mastermind for podcasters, people that want to grow their podcast, monetize it, find ways to use it as a business tool. And going into the interview, I had mentioned to the people, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Daryl Eves. Do you have any questions for him? Right. And so during the discussion, I asked the questions from the group and had Daryl give them a shout out on the podcast itself. So it kind of was able to mix in like a cameo element, right?
Love that.
Where it's like, yeah, Samuel Maine, this is Daryl Eves, and you should do X, Y, Z, So that was a really cool moment too. There's been so many, but those were a couple that I think really, really stand out to me.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Was there any episodes for you that were a trigger then for like more success or future success, more downloads? Obviously you've been creating podcasts now for years, so I'm expecting that it has just been this journey, but is there anything that really helped you leapfrog from where you're at?
So the answer is absolutely yes. There are a couple points in particular that really jump out. So one of which was an interview that I had with Jasmine Starr. Jasmine's awesome. She created Social Curator. It's a program where you go in once a month and it sets up all of your photography and all of your social media posts for that month. It's a cool
cool.
product. Yeah. And she's done really well. So much personality on that woman. She just brings oodles of energy, and you get a lot of Jasmine. So what happened was we had a really great chat, really great conversation. She enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We had a lot of takeaways.
Yeah.
And at the end, what she did, she said, "Hey, Mark, this was an awesome interview. I'd like to share it on my podcast itself." I said, "Sure." So she shared on her podcast, and then that drove a ton of traffic to my show, because people liked the way that, they liked the rapport, like the way we talked there. And so people came over to me. So that was a super hot moment. Really I think one of the big keys to actually building and growing your audience is getting more people to listen to it, and some, one of the best ways to do that is getting your big guests to share. And that can sometimes be a challenge. A lot of guests won't share, and that can be a source of frustration for sure, especially when you're putting in time, energy, and money. So anytime, and that's something I've worked on a lot over the years, is how can I get guests to share more? And that's been a big deal in tweaking those processes.
That's probably an area I need to improve. I think because I approach this in just a way where I'm just genuinely intrigued in the conversation and want to have that fun conversation with that guest. I'm not really actually thinking too much about the marketing and so on. I'm just like, hey, I just want to chat. I want to hang out. I want to have some fun. I want to learn, and I hope that they can also get some value from it. So yeah. I've got some areas to improve there. So we've spoken about potential best guests. We've spoken about some guests that were triggers for future success or more success. I won't get you to name your worst guest, but do you have maybe a horror story or a funny story that happened on one of your shows? I'm just genuinely.
Yeah, I definitely have. When you've been podcasting as long as I have, you definitely do. So I'll give you one. A few months ago, I had on the show Manny Cabo. He was on The Voice. He was on Team Adam on The Voice. Anyway, this guy knows audio. Like when you get him on the mic, it's very noticeable. He's way outside the standard deviation. We'll put it that way. And so I brought him on to talk about audio quality. How can we improve the quality of our audio? What are some things we can do? Cables, mics, softwares, mic positioning, room treatments, all that good stuff. It was awesome. Really good. He just brought the heat. And after the interview was done and I sent it over to my team to work on and repurpose, I got a memo back from my video editor and he said, "Dude, what's up with your audio? It sounds horrible." And so what I recognized was throughout the recording process, somehow, instead of recording on my, $1,000 recording rig here with the Rodecaster and the Shure microphone, it recorded through my webcam. And the juxtaposition, the contrast between the quality of the guest with this beautiful audio engineered sound and mine was horrible. And I said, I cannot possibly share an episode about audio quality if I'm like this. So luckily I'm friends with Manny and he agreed to come back on for re-recording, which was even better than the first one, to be fair. But yeah, that was a moment. And I think one of the takeaways from that is you always need to have a pre-interview checklist. You got to have it. What are some things you can check off just to make sure that those type of mishaps don't happen, because they're not fun. They're not fun.
Love that. My anxiety went through the roof as soon as you mentioned about that, not recording on the microphone. I was like, oh, please be recording on mine. I was double checking everything. Are we good? Are we good?
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine there's been some challenges. I love that you can't write that you had someone who's on for audio quality, and that's exactly what unfortunately let you down. Yeah, that's not ideal. I've had the recording stop on me already. That's happened, but hey, part of the process. So if you were to scrap everything that you've done so far and you were ultimately to start a podcast fresh, what steps would you take? If you were starting again.
Right. So, it's important to realize why you podcast, but for me specifically, I'm podcasting because I want to generate income. I want to generate revenue. I want time freedom. So what I would do is I would first look at myself, my business, the potential things that I can offer, and I'll get really clear on like what's something that I can sell for. What's something that I can sell? Whether that's coaching, production, it doesn't matter what it is. Whether you're selling um, seats on airplanes or timeshares, what can I sell? Okay. Then I would go down to the next level and say, okay, you know, based on what I'm selling, who's going to buy this? Who's the person that's going to want to buy this particular product, right? I'm working with a client now who sells um, uh, basically Affordable Care Act compliance tools and consultations. One client could be tens of thousands of dollars, right? So, we want to get clear on, who we speak to, where, basically your basic avatar exercise, right? And then I'm going to determine one of two things. How can I get this perfect avatar on the phone with me so I can sell them on my offering? That's the best way because you can start making money from day one with this type of strategy. Or B, maybe it's a low value item. Maybe I'm selling widgets on Amazon, So in that case, I'm going to develop a show and that I can get the people on the show that are going to attract my ideal audience. Right. So you kind of got to understand where your money's coming from. That would be the first thing I would think about. Is it guests that coming on, they're my ideal client, or am I going to use the guest to attract my ideal client? Right. And so that would be the way that I would think about the formulation.
I like that. Really interesting. It always starts with your intent.
100%. I go into Podfest. There were people there that they just podcast just because they like to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, right? They have no agenda,
Yeah.
and I think that's great. You podcast why you want to podcast, but if you go into a podcast just thinking I'm just going to start recording and let's see what happens, that can work. But you're going to get battered and bruised. There's going to be blood, sweat, and tears as you're going to spend thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, without recouping. So that's one of the first things I do when working with clients is, why are we even on the call? What is your actual goal? Now let's talk about how we can achieve that goal together. Because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, obviously, I'm looking at this as a way to connect with new people. And I know that is already bringing opportunity, which of course, business-wise is very valuable. Plus I get to learn and get exposed to new industries, new people, and up level. So it's a win-win for me. I'm not doing it from a point of like trying to grow a massive audience or something, because I'm already getting the benefit and it's just too much fun. Like that's the biggest.
When you're developing these relationships, again, I was just at Podfest and like the amount of people that I already knew just through interviews, I knew everybody.
Yeah.
So it just gives you it's hugely valuable for your credibility and referrals and so on.
Love that. So obviously you have the multiple shows that you're working on and the hundreds, if not thousands at this point, episodes that you've produced. Talk to me a little bit more then about actual Markzware Media and some of the ultimately the done for you services that you do with the podcast. And what does that look like? Tell me some more about that.
Yeah. So really, I run a launch and production agency for podcasts, right? So I have a podcast launch kit, very affordable. Right now, I think we're at $2,500. Depends when we release it, but $2,500. And we're going to basically take your idea and we're going to put it out to the world within 6 weeks. So people are going to be listening to you and your message. So that's everything from what kind of hardware you need, what kind of software, the strategy that we were talking about, who am I speaking to, copyright-free music, intros, artwork. We give you 4 completely done episodes so you can actually upload it. We upload it because we need to maximize and set up your RSS feed. So again, basically we make it as easy as possible for you for $2,500 to get your show out there. And then on the back end, we manage the month to month, the day-to-day type of production to make sure that your show continues to roll, continues to function like we originally planned. That's my main offering at marksavantmedia.com. But I've got a lot of different streams of income, all thanks to podcasting. Without the podcasting, I've got maybe a half dozen different streams of income because of it.
It's I look at that as like, it's just ultimately a fast track for someone, because like we say, there is a lot of complexity that goes into this. I was only able to fast track some of it personally because of my experience in managing a team, but without my team, I just could not have done this, and I would have needed that fast track. So I love that setup, and it ensures quality from the get-go.
Right.
Because like you say, for me, obviously, it could have been better at the start.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
quite.
it always is, right? But now there's about 3 million podcasts out there, so there's some things that you need to learn. And some people say, Mark, I just want to learn the hard way and talk about Dungeons and Dragons. That's cool. Other people are like, Mark, I got this idea. Let's go. Let's make it happen. And we give you the best quality product as quickly as possible.
Yeah, love that. So what's some of the biggest challenges that people face when starting a podcast?
There's so many. There's so many. I think probably the biggest common denominator, Sam, is like an imposter syndrome. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but like it's your first time behind your mic and you're like, I'm not Barbara Walters. Like what gives me the right to be on this microphone today? And then you listen to yourself back and, I hate the way my voice sounds. That's probably the most common denominator is people being afraid to hit record and just going. But once you get through that, it's like every time it gets easier. But I still, I got to speak on stage this past weekend and I was nervous going up there, but once you get into it, it just goes to rolling. And, we talked earlier in this episode, Sam, about moving from employee to employer. I read the 4-Hour Workweek a few years ago back here. If you're going to have any success, I believe this, if you're going to have any success making that transition, you have to be comfortable with discomfort. You have to be willing to say, this sucks. This doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right, but I'm going to lean in anyway. And so that's really what I try to instill, in the people around me is, listen, you have greatness inside you. You just got to embrace it. You got to embrace the suck for a little while and get better at it. It's kind of funny, Sam. It becomes kind of, at least for me, it's become an addiction.
Yeah.
Almost. You ever feel that way? Like, yes, I just failed and now I'm going to be better at it. It's weird. While some people kind of run away from the failure and the challenge, when you start getting after it, it becomes kind of like
addicting.
Yeah, I can't get away from it now. Like if I have a day where I don't get a lot done, I'm like, I feel like I wasted it, So
it's a lot more.
Yeah.
It's that imposter syndrome, ultimately, even for me, that held me back massively. That's why I didn't hit record for so long. I overcomplicated hitting record. I overcomplicated the need for it to be perfect. And of course, then you have the judgment from other people and things like that. And that was why I needed to drastically change my own perspective to be like, actually, no, it doesn't matter. I'm doing this so that I can learn, I can connect. And I knew that it was something that I was going to enjoy. And then 5 minutes into my first podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I should have done this and started this years ago. I mentioned there, like, obviously some of the confronting beliefs I had around what judgments I'd get from other people. For you, maybe not even when you were starting, but now that obviously you've probably shared a lot about your life, your journey, and the process and building the business. How have other people, especially close, maybe family, partners, how have they responded to you sharing so much of your journey and life online?
It's interesting. I think my immediate family is very supportive. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. We live in a world now where like it can be scary putting yourself out there because you don't know who you're going to offend or things are going to go the wrong way from a cultural standpoint. But for me personally, I just think that being genuine and being authentic, at least for myself, has been it's just been such a game changer. And I think the world is just, there's so much inauthenticity. I don't know if that's a word. There's a lack of authenticity. So, I think that I almost feel like I have an obligation to get out there and share. And a lot of people don't understand. don't get it. And I find that to be so motivating. I had a client of mine in the insurance industry who I explained, hey, you know, I'm leaving insurance. I'm going all in on podcasting. That's what I'm doing. And he's like, Mark, I've known this guy a long time. It's like, Mark, I don't know if that's a good idea. Why don't you, why don't you try to go and start your own insurance agency and do that? I was like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I straight up, you don't understand it. And, you know, when you're trying to build any sort of digital business online, people don't understand. It's amazing. You probably get this too. People will say like, well, why don't you go get a real job, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're living in a mentality from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, when I talk to people about NFTs and crypto and how I think it's going to change the world, people that just don't get it. And that's fine. I use it as fuel, baby.
Mm-hmm.
I use it as fuel, right? Like, you know, I cannot wait to show you what's possible.
Yeah.
I cannot wait, because in 10 years, you're going to be like, wow, I'm still at the same place at a corporate job that I hate, looking forward to Fridays, and Mark is actually doing it. And I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I think that's a necessary part, and finding ways to internalize, the doubts and the negativity in a healthy way. It's a game changer. That is the game, I think.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm still in that slight transition. I think actually COVID and the last 2 years, because of the importance or the awareness of online work has drastically increased because of COVID. So that's actually helped. Now those around me and things like that have gone, oh, actually, I recognize it now. Oh, I see what you're doing. And I've seen why you've been struggling for that many years because of this payoff. So that's actually, you know, I'm in that transition. But yeah, it's not easy, you know, and that's the nature of being an entrepreneur and developing the business and taking those leaps. But that's also how you get those rewards, right? That's how you can live a different life and strive towards those dreams, which is exciting.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to share this too, because I was recently having a sit down with my wife. So I put it, you know, you get it. You put in a lot of effort, right? While other families are out going out to dinner, you know, or going out to parties or whatever, we're here putting in the effort. We're putting in that after hours effort, right? And my wife just said like, oh, I feel like, you know, you're not around enough, or you're not invested enough, or you're, and you know, we kind of sat down, and I'm very invested. Like Saturdays and Sundays are family days, and, you know, I watch the kids often. Anyway, I digress. I host the Awesome Dad Show. It's about being an awesome dad, right? So I make a lot of Yeah. You have to have the balance. But I sat down with her. I said, look, like, what are the things that are important to you? What do you want out of life? And so we sat down, we started like, we want a house. You know, we want to make sure that our retirement is fueled. We want to make sure that our kids are safe and we're secure. We wrote down all this list, and I said, how do you think that we're going to get here? Right? We're going to need to make the things that we want are not average. These are above average things. And it's going to take above average effort to get there. It's going to take sacrifice to get there. We're not going to get there just going to our 9 to 5 and then watching, you know, Survivor at night. Right. And she got it. I could see that something clicked in her. And, you know, I just think that we're in a good place right now. But that's another thing that's challenging as an entrepreneur is, you know, the relationships of those around you. So I just wanted to kind of break that down, because that I think was a really key moment in our relationship as husband and wife, is getting clear on why we're making the decisions that we're making and trying to put those goals out in front of us.
Yeah, I think having that buy-in, and you need that buy-in, you need that support, because ultimately, you know, being an entrepreneur, doing what we're doing, it can be a very lonely game. It's a very challenging game. It requires a lot of work, a lot of hours. You know, it's now closing 8 p.m. for me. I've been sat at my desk since, you know, 7 a.m.
Yes.
It's that's part of the fun, though, in a way. That's how I've started to look at it. It's like that's why it's different, and that also excites me then, because it's like, see where I can go, what I can do, what I can achieve.
Yeah, the benchmarks are cool. Like this month, yesterday I told my wife, this is the most money our business account has ever had in it, and that's a cool feeling. It's kind of like when you're playing a video game, like let's say you're playing World of Warcraft, and you're like, oh, I just beat that one difficult boss, or I just got this piece of gear, and you kind of get that feeling, you know.
I actually spoke to previous guest Brandon Eastman about the link to gaming and leveling up in gaming and how that can be applied to your everyday life. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. But also, it's very important to highlight. It's taken years. It was miserable for me for years. And now things have changed around a lot. But yeah, it's taken a long time to get there. A lot of work to get there to be in this place. So now I'm just very grateful for it. We get to hang out and chat and record a podcast, and we get to call that business and call that work. Very fortunate in that way. Mark, you mentioned NFTs, you mentioned crypto, and I know this is a world that you're very heavily involved in. I do have a pretty significant amount of money for me anyway in the crypto space, and I've had some exposure to NFTs, and I own a few NFTs. I bought some from a local artist that I support, but I'd love to just know a little bit more about your journey in NFTs, cryptos, and what that's actually looked like and what you're doing right now in the crypto space.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Super fascinating topic, moving very quickly. I started investing in cryptocurrency. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was either late 2017 or early 2018.
Nice.
And I remember when I started buying in, I made a public announcement, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin or whatever. We talked about this earlier. People were like, the journey's over. It's already spiked. You're wasting your money. I mean, it's gone up a lot since then, although now it's down. It's like a wild ride.
It's been a rough year.
Yeah, it was like way up and now it's way down. But I don't regret any of my crypto purchases. I think that moving forward, blockchain technology, cryptocurrency is absolutely going to change the way that the world works. Frankly, I'm not a huge fan of centralized anything. Yeah. When you centralize monetary policy, governmental policy, all this stuff, it only takes one bad apple or a couple bad apples to completely destroy. You're seeing that. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to just cite examples because we all know what we're talking about, but we'll just take Russia, right? I don't know anything about Russia or Russian oligarchs or whatever, but Russians, they get cut off from payment systems. No, you can't actually make payments anymore. Yeah. You can't exchange. That's a big freaking deal. Yeah. Even in Canada, you had the whole trucker protest, and then the Canadian bank said, oh, we're just going to freeze all of your assets. Whoa, that's pretty crazy stuff. Wherever you fall on that from a political standpoint, I don't think it matters. The fact is that it's possible for that to happen.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that with various cryptocurrencies, you don't have to rely on a central bank to stamp the transaction to say it's valid. It's stamped by all the other users who are validating that particular blockchain. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why I think it's really fascinating. There's a long way to go. Yeah.
So interesting. It's I've started to learn more and more about it, and I'm still definitely in a learning phase. I wasn't an early adopter 2018. I mean, obviously there's people even earlier than that. I've started to look at it actually as a way of risk mitigating for my future. And I think a lot of people view crypto as very risky. And of course there's risk, any investment's risky, but crypto definitely has a higher association to risk than most other assets. But I'm looking at it as, if you looked at real estate 50 years ago, you could have bought real estate for pennies ultimately. And the value that increased by now is significant.
Yeah.
So back then, most people weren't buying real estate that much. Whereas now I'm looking at it as okay, crypto, there's this potential that this could be a complete life changer for the financial industry, the economy, in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So even for me, just a 5%, 10% exposure, I've got more than that, but an exposure to crypto, to NFTs, and that blockchain decentralized finance is actually a way for me to de-risk. And of course, none of it is financial advice. This is just my understanding at this current moment, and that may change. But that's how I've actually been approaching it. It's actually if this does have that potential to grow significantly in the next 50 years, I'm more at risk for not having, a piece of the pie than I am by, risking that money that I do have invested. So that's my approach.
Yeah.
Are you along the same lines? Is yours slightly different? How do you look at essentially the investment in crypto for you? And of course, I don't need numbers and stuff like that, but how are you approaching it?
Yeah, no, I agree. There is certainly tremendous upside in cryptocurrency. It's so new. It is certainly very volatile. You're seeing like huge spikes, huge.
God, yeah.
I mean, the peaks and valleys are just crazy. I mean, there's coin. Yeah, you don't have to go far to look, but I had a friend who was buying this ape coin, which is on a blockchain based on the Bored Ape Yacht Club,
Yeah.
which is a big NFT project. And he bought in at like $7, which was like the day after it had launched. And then I didn't buy in because I didn't know about it. He starts texting me like every day. It's up to 15. It's up to 20. Holy cow, $27. And then I looked in a couple days later and it's down to 6, right? So it's just like over the course of a month, it just did this huge spike, right? So it's very difficult to predict what's going to work or what's not going to work. But another reason why I'm bullish on crypto is that it's also independent of, loose monetary policy. Like the Fed, if the Fed wants to pump out trillions of dollars, that, I'm on crypto. So I think that right now they're very, very closely linked. You can see as the dollar moves, as the stock market moves, so does crypto. I don't necessarily know that that's going to be a long-term thing. But we'll see. I mean, again, not financial advice, but I think that if you're just investing in some of the main cryptos like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, maybe XRP, like I don't think it can go too wrong. I don't think that Bitcoin's going to go to zero. I mean, it could. Personally, I think it's more likely that something like Bitcoin would go to 100K rather than zero.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
It's super interesting. Like you say, the volatility is massive. At the moment, it is still very heavily linked to stocks. All the asset costs have dropped significantly. Only housing is ultimately kind of held its own, maybe gold, arguably. I think those cryptocurrencies, those stable coins, ultimately are now finding their floors.
Yeah,
where they'll drop to, and they're pretty much there. Of course, they can drop even more, but it's super interesting. From my perspective, I just love having these conversations. I feel that most people don't talk enough about investments, about business, about finances. It's still seen as a relatively taboo subject. Whereas like, I love talking about this. Like, I want to see you succeed. I want to see you make more money than ever, because I know that that leads to a happier life for you. It leads to you being able to help more people, to give more, and to be more fulfilled in what you're doing. And yeah, I wish that people could have more open conversations about finances, business, crypto, accounting. Because
especially NFTs too. I'd love to hear which NFT projects you bought into. You said some art, but like NFTs, people think of them as just JPEGs, but I'm even more excited about NFTs than I am with crypto, just because of the utility that goes behind an NFT and the dividends that can be attached and ownership, proof of stake. There's so many amazing things that can be done.
It's that the NFT, that I believe is the true game changer.
Yeah.
That link to the contract. So one of my close girlfriends, she's absolutely awesome, incredible artist. And she basically launched her own NFT project. And so I supported her by buying a couple of pieces of the NFT art, and they're incredible, super, super unique. And I would love to see, it's really expensive. I don't know if you've looked into it, having an NFT display. So I would love to have that in my office where I've got a display.
That's cool.
You can get displays of all of your art, but they're super expensive right now. It's kind of like overkill. There's a massive gap in the market potentially there. So I was like, these pieces of art would be amazing to fulfill that role. And obviously all the NFTs you own, it can switch between all of those art. So you've got this one frame on your wall, but it's going to showcase all of your NFTs, and you can actually barcode them to see then you can link it to the online. But where you mentioned there about linking the smart contracts with the dividends and the splits there, that I believe is going to be incredibly powerful. It's being heavily used in the music industry right now, but from what I'm seeing, it's not been much used for like coaching industry, which I'm obviously heavily involved in. I think there's massive potential for it to be used in podcasts. I've barely seen it used at all right now, and it's something I'd love to explore a little bit more. Example, let's say Joe Rogan, just because it's everyone knows his podcast. Imagine every guest that he had on, they sold NFTs to go alongside the podcast. And then they split those dividends between Joe Rogan and the guest. Of course, Joe Rogan doesn't need the money, but how valuable would that be for all of his guests that they're now going to get an income from the viewers of that show on top of the other funnels and sales pitches and everything they have. Plus, Joe Rogan's going to get a dividend from every single guest. So if he interviews 1,000 people, he's now getting 1,000 splits every single time too. And those NFTs can grant access to additional coaching, additional content, the behind the scenes, whatever it may be. That I think is going to be game changing.
Yeah, that was actually that was a strategy that I heard shared at the conference last weekend. The key, I think, and this is why I launched the show NFTs Made Simple, because there is something huge there. We're not exactly sure where it's going. But I think one of the problems, or one of the traps that people are falling into in this particular field, is they're getting too caught up in quote unquote community. And where you really want to be is, what is the utility? What does this thing give me? And I love the idea about the display that you could put on your wall. I think that the art piece is going to be huge, but I think that's a ways out.
Yes.
I think where we're at, cause if you could be Zuckerberg over at Meta is developing VR, insane VR technology. And one of the projects he's working on now is obviously the recreational video game side with the Rift too. But he's also working on a more expensive professional style, so that what you can do is anywhere you go, you'll have your optimal workstation with you, just with your goggles. Now, you can be assured that everybody that has these goggles is going to want to have special art in their room, and NFTs are going to be a part of that artwork. It's going to be, so that's a big thing. But right now I'm really looking at, with NFTs, what's going to differentiate is, what's the utility? What does it get me? Does it give me, a ticket to an event?
I've seen that. Powerful.
Yep. Does it give me a piece of the music that sells, right? Does it give me access to specific access to a coach? Do I get to go play basketball with Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever? What's the actual utility that's behind the NFT? So it's just cool because there's projects coming out all the time. And so I think, in 60 years or whatever, when I'm talking to my grandkids, this is what you're going to remember. You're going to remember, I remember the world before NFTs. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
It's not the smartphone. It's not Google. It's going to be NFTs. So it's going to be really cool to see how it plays out.
It's going to be so interesting. And to think, what is it let's say 20 years ago, we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have MacBooks, right? And now you can't really imagine a world without this level of technology. So that's what's going to happen with some of the crypto, some of the NFTs. And there is so much potential with it. And I think you're right. We've barely scratched the surface. And, my understanding of it is very limited, but I can see the potential, which is intriguing.
Well, the fact that you're having the conversations and you're thinking about it and you're getting involved, even on a smaller scale, at least with the NFTs, you're in the 1% of the 1%, right? And I think that's what's interesting. I'm not really in the NFT market to get really rich. There's people that are doing that. I'm there because I see that over the course of the next 5-10 years, I'll be able to leverage my connections and my knowledge of the space to provide massive value to clients in my podcast business. I'm not just going to be another podcast agency. I'm going to be the guy that can launch the NFT with the podcast, which is going to be a huge differentiator from what other people are doing. So that's kind of the way that my 5 and 10 year plan are looking.
I love that. Love that. Yeah, I actually created some NFTs and shared some NFTs that went alongside the podcast.
Nice.
I actually stopped it. I only done it once. And the reason was because I I have a pattern of overcomplicating things in my life and adding. So I was like, okay, the reason I started the podcast or took so long to start the podcast was because I overcomplicated it. And here I am developing NFTs that I'm going to sell alongside the podcast. And I was like, I got to stop. I've got to just enjoy creating again and strip it back a little bit. So,
but you did it. You minted some NFTs, right? So
yeah, through the process, learned a lot about it. It was great. I enjoyed it. And I would like to continue learning about it.
That's super cool. That's super cool.
Love it. So, Mark, this has been a lot of fun. I have a question that I ask every single one of my guests, and it's a little bit confronting, but I think you'll tackle it very, very well. The question is, what advice would your future self give you in this current moment? I'll read it again for you one more time to give you some time to think about it. What advice would your future self give you in this current moment?
It's a tough question. That's a very difficult question because there's so much unknown. I think what my future self would tell me would be, you're on the right track. Don't get distracted. Right? You're on the right track. Put in the work now, but also keep things in perspective. There's just like so much advice my future self could tell me, but I think that's the core is focus on what you're doing. Don't lose sight of what's really important. And get ready to dig down deep because it's going to get tough. It's going to get tough. So be prepared for the challenges, embrace them, and overcome. I don't know. I feel like I could, that's a really tough question. But at least in the place where I'm at in my life, I understand that the next couple of years are going to be immensely challenging, immensely challenging. Lots of clients, lots of financial challenges. We're going into what's potentially a really bad, maybe the worst market of our lifetime. But I think I would just I'd hopefully reassure myself that I'm on the right path. But just be prepared for some pain, and it's not going to last forever. Be prepared for the pain. Let's get through it. And let's live that life of abundance that you were talking about.
I like it. Very good answer. Very good answer. So, Mark, we've spoken about a lot of things today. This has been awesome. The podcasts, the businesses, the NFTs, cryptos. It's been great. And obviously delving into your journey too. I'm going to have all of your links, everything that, the website, the podcast, all of that's going to be in the information below. But is there one area that the guys should go to that's kind of preferred for you to learn more about you and potentially look at some of your businesses too?
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy. Markzware Media. If you go to any platform, whether that's Google, whether that's Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Markzware Media, probably the best way to get me is go to Instagram, go to @Markzware Media, and DM me code word Sam. Keyword Sam. So go to @Markzware Media on Instagram, DM me keyword Sam. I'll know where they came from.
There we go. Smart. Good thinking. Mark, I just want to express my gratitude for you coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot too. And I'm grateful for you letting me be a part of your mentorship program. And I look forward to what's to come.
Brother, it's been such a blessing. I look forward to watching big things happen for you.
Thank you.